Is it true that a brief embrace can hold thousands of unspoken meanings, powerful enough to shake millions of hearts in silence? Or was that seemingly simple moment actually a hidden fragment of a deeper story, waiting to be revealed at the most unexpected time? These are the questions that suddenly flooded the minds of fans when a scene, almost unnoticed at first, transformed into one of the most emotionally overwhelming moments in the journey of BTS. Amid an atmosphere heavy with grief, where silence felt heavier than words, public attention was not only focused on the farewell ceremony but also on a fleeting interaction, one that lasted only seconds, yet left an emotional imprint that lingered far longer. It all began in the moments before the funeral of a family member of J-Hope, a moment that should have remained private, far from public eyes, yet inevitably drew attention from those who follow every step of BTS. No one was truly prepared for what happened next. As Jungkook walked slowly, his head lowered, the vibrant energy he is known for replaced by a quiet stillness, many began to realize that this day was not only about loss, but about carrying an emotional weight too heavy to express. But everything shifted when he approached J-Hope's older sister, a figure rarely in the spotlight, now at the center of attention as she stood in the midst of family grief. And then the embrace happened. There were no words, no dramatic expressions, just a brief hug, almost like a silent whisper. Yet that is precisely where its power lay. Armies who witnessed or later heard about the moment felt something indescribable. Why did that hug feel so different? Why did it leave so many people speechless, as if they understood something that had never been spoken aloud? Some observers of K-pop culture began to question, was this simply an act of empathy, or was there something deeper that had long remained unseen by the public? In an industry often defined by image and performance, moments that feel this genuine are rare. And perhaps that rarity is exactly why its impact felt so profound. The atmosphere at the funeral was described as calm, yet emotionally intense. The other members of BTS were present, each carrying their own quiet expressions of grief. RM occasionally lowered his head, seemingly lost in thought. Jin stood upright, composed, though his eyes could not fully conceal his sadness. Suga remained mostly silent, keeping a slight distance, yet his presence felt steady. Jimin was seen gently wiping his face more than once, while V stood slightly apart, gazing ahead as if trying to process the weight of the moment. Yet among all of this, Jungkook's gesture remained at the center of attention. Many began linking the moment to the deep bond shared not only among the members but also with each other's families. Some believe that Jungkook, as the youngest member, has always had a uniquely emotional connection with his older bandmates, including J-Hope. And perhaps that embrace was a reflection of that bond, something beyond words, something that could only be felt. The reaction from ARMY was equally striking. Social media quickly filled with speculation, interpretations, and raw emotion. Many admitted they cried just from reading about the moment, even without clear video footage. Why does it feel like that hug meant something more? One fan wrote. Another added, it wasn't just comfort. It felt like he was saying something deeper. But is that truly the case? Or is this simply an emotional interpretation from fans who feel deeply connected to their idols? Some analysts tried to approach it from a more rational perspective. In South Korean culture, a hug during times of mourning carries deep significance. It is not merely a physical gesture, but a symbol of solidarity, respect, and shared grief. What made this moment different, however, was the context. Jungkook was not a family member, yet his embrace felt as though he belonged within that circle. This raises another question. How deep are the bonds between BTS members and each other's families? Have fans only ever seen the surface of a much more complex emotional connection? At the same time, others began to connect this moment to the immense pressure faced by K-pop idols. Living under constant public scrutiny often requires them to suppress emotions, maintain composure, and remain professional at all times. Yet moments like this reveal a different side. a human side rarely seen. And perhaps that is where its true power lies. Jungkook's embrace may have lasted only seconds, but its impact endures far beyond that moment. It has become a symbol of something greater, of friendship, of loss, of how someone can be there for another without needing to say a single word. But the story does not end there. Because after that moment, many began noticing subtle changes in the members' behavior. Was it merely the lingering effect of grief, or something deeper unfolding behind the scenes? Some fans claim they saw a shift in their expressions in later appearances. More reflective, more subdued, even more emotional. Could this signal a new phase in their journey? Or is it the beginning of something far more significant, something yet to be revealed? One thing is certain, that brief embrace left a mark that cannot be erased. It serves as a reminder that behind the dazzling world of entertainment, there are real people who feel, who grieve, and who support one another in ways that transcend words. And perhaps that is why ARMY fell silent. Not because they had nothing to say. And yet, the deeper question continues to echo long after that moment fades from immediate memory. What was truly carried within that silence? Was it simply grief shared between individuals connected by circumstance? Or was it something far more layered, something rooted in years of unseen moments, quiet loyalty, and unspoken understanding among those who have lived much of their lives under the same relentless spotlight? In the hours that followed, the atmosphere surrounding BTS seemed to shift in a way that was subtle, yet unmistakable to those who have followed them closely. There was no official statement that dissected the emotions of that day, no detailed explanation offered to the public. And perhaps that absence of explanation only deepened the intrigue, because when something so raw is left without narrative framing, people begin to search for meaning on their own. For many fans, that search led them back through years of memories, old clips, interviews, behind-the-scenes moments, anything that might provide context. They revisited times when Jungkook leaned on J-Hope during difficult rehearsals, or moments when J-Hope's steady presence seemed to anchor the group through uncertainty. These fragments, once seen as ordinary interactions, began to take on new weight. Could it be that what unfolded in that quiet embrace was not just a reaction to a single moment of loss, but the culmination of years of shared experiences? Observers began to notice how grief, when experienced collectively, often reveals the true structure of relationships. It strips away performance, removes expectation, and leaves only what is genuine. In that sense, the embrace was not merely about offering comfort, it was about recognition. Recognition of pain, of connection, and perhaps even of responsibility. Because in a group like BTS, where each member's emotional state can ripple outward, the burden of support is rarely carried alone. The cultural context cannot be ignored either. In South Korea, expressions of grief are often layered with restraint. Public displays of emotion are not always exaggerated, but rather controlled, deliberate, and deeply meaningful. Within that framework, a gesture like Jungkook's becomes even more significant. It was not loud, not prolonged, not performative, and precisely because of that, it resonated. Some cultural commentators even suggested that the moment reflected a generational shift within the industry. Where once idols were expected to maintain near-perfect composure at all times, there is now a gradual acceptance of vulnerability, though still within limits. Could this moment be seen as part of that shift? Or was it simply too personal to be categorized within broader industry trends? Meanwhile, attention quietly turned toward J-Hope himself. Though he remained composed throughout the proceedings, those who observed closely noted subtle signs of emotional weight. Small pauses, a slight tightening of expression, moments where his gaze seemed distant. It was not overt, but it was there. And perhaps that is what made everything feel even more fragile. Because when someone known for their brightness carries sorrow so quietly, it creates a contrast that is difficult to ignore. The role of family also came into sharper focus. J-Hope's older sister, who had rarely been a central figure in public narratives, suddenly became part of a moment that connected the private and public worlds in an unexpected way. Her presence, her grief, and that brief interaction with Jungkook formed a bridge between two spheres that are usually kept separate. And in that intersection, something undeniably human emerged, something that no performance, no choreography, no stage could replicate. As the days passed, the online discourse did not fade. If anything, it evolved. What began as shock turned into reflection. Fans started asking more complex questions, not just about what happened, but about what it revealed. What does it mean to truly support someone in a life that is constantly observed? How do individuals maintain authentic relationships when so much of their existence is mediated through cameras and public perception? There were no easy answers. And perhaps that was the point. Because moments like this resist simplification. They exist in the space between what is seen and what is felt, between what is known and what is imagined. And in that space, people project their own experiences, their own understanding of loss, comfort, and connection. Some fans shared personal stories, drawing parallels between that brief embrace and moments in their own lives when words failed them. Others chose silence, feeling that anything said would fall short. And in that collective response, whether expressed or withheld, there was a kind of unity. Not the loud celebratory unity often associated with fandoms, but a quieter, more introspective one. It is also worth considering how time will shape the memory of this moment.
Will it remain a singular ghatna, an isolated emotional flashpoint, or will it become part of a larger narrative about growth, resilience, and the evolving identity of BTS?
History has shown that even the smallest moments can take on greater significance when viewed in retrospect. And yet, there is a risk in overanalyzing. Not every gesture is a coded message.